Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 88 with Dr. Donald Hecht. So really appreciated this conversation, just kind of wide-ranging about lifelong learning and Dr. Hecht's journey as a founder of an institution in California Southern University, that was exploring really early distance education endeavors. So he has a really unique journey of how he got started with doing that, and sort of his values and kind of philosophy behind his efforts there. Just was kind of a good serendipitous connection that we made recently, and I'm glad that we can share out this lovely conversation with you all to listen to. So without further ado, let's get to it. Episode number 88 with Dr. Donald Hecht. Well, I appreciate you so much for taking time out for the podcast. And this is, you just reached out to chat and hang out here. And I really appreciate, us being able to make this happen. And, I think you'll have like a really unique perspective than some of my other guests that I've had that, you've been in higher ed for such a long time and you founded a college, which is incredible. And, we'll be just talking about a lot and, just excited to hear about your experience and your perspective. But just so we can kind of get a little bit of your origin story, as it were, if you want to give everybody a brief introduction of who you are and your professional journey of how you got to be where you are today. And I know it's a long one, so if you want to just give a quick summary, and then we'll kind of explore some pieces of it. But if you just want to introduce yourself and kind of go through your professional journey real quick.
Well, professionally, it starts out as me being an engineer. Somebody gave me an exam in high school, said, "Hey, you should be an engineer." And before I knew it, I was an engineer, not quite knowing what engineering was all about. 4 years of engineering school, came out as an engineer. And then I spent 5 years working in the missile business, Redstone, Jupiter, Saturn missiles, which was very interesting, but it was, for me, it was not enough. Engineering was fine, but it was a little too mechanical for me. I wanted more contact with people. So I went back to school to talk about continuing education, lifelong learning. And I got my master's degree in industrial engineering, which was more concerned with the people aspect of things rather than with the mechanical aspect of things. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed getting the degree. And now what do I do with it? So after a while, I decided maybe I should be a teacher. Nobody gave me an exam and said, here's what teachers do, or here's what a teacher is. But I enjoyed good teachers when I was in high school, when I was in college. And I felt maybe I can do the same thing, deliver some information and turn people on and make them excited with it. So I went into high school teaching a couple of years. After that, I said, hey, I'd like to teach at the junior college level. And while going and earning my doctorate in management, engineering management, actually, I always stayed with the basic foundation of being an engineer type. But the management aspect of engineering, the people aspect intrigued me. And for 10 years, I was a professor at a community college in New York, where I learned that I like teaching. I like turning students on to new knowledge, watching the light bulb go on, or the sudden realization in their eyes that they've understood something. And then I said to myself, uh, maybe I can change the way education is being conceived and delivered in traditional schools with classrooms and everybody assumed to be at the same level of expertise and the same level of knowledge and the same level of ability. And then you're measured against the other, and there's the curve, the normal curve, and then you're going to give out a certain number of A's and B's and C's. And that sort of struck me as overlooking the fact that learning is an individual task. It's something one does for oneself, self-actualization, self-promotion, feeling good about oneself, or exploring new learning opportunities, new areas to go into. Anyway, I drifted on and I became a dean of instruction at a university here in California. was born and bred in New York and educated in New York, worked in New York, and all of a sudden I became a transplant 3,500 miles away. I was in California now as a dean, and I was a dean at a school that was evening only, and it was for adults, working adults, who wanted to get their bachelor's degrees in some technological field, technology, and also wanted a master's, usually in business or in tech management, etc. So I fit in. My credentials allowed me to jump aboard and become a dean and try to influence how education was delivered to these adult learners, working adult learners. And it was very meaningful to me because I earned my master's and my doctorate, a total of about 15 years of additional graduate
Mm,
work while working and having a family and having raised kids and having bills and everything that goes along with being a parent. So I had a feeling that these people coming to me to learn at the university in California really shared the same experiences that I had. And I was comfortable with them, and I understood why it was difficult for them to stay awake after a day's work, coming to school at 6 p.m. and sitting there till 9:30, uh,
right.
2 or 3 days a week. Uh, you don't absorb as well. The brain is slowed down, it's tired, etc. And those are what I felt. So I said to myself, I'd be corny. I said to myself, there's got to be a better way of delivering education on an individualized platform whereby you don't treat everybody the same. Whereas if somebody falls asleep, you don't wake them, let them sleep, but you have to reach them when they're awake. So I said, I might as well start my own university. I didn't grow up wanting to start my own university, but suddenly here I am, 40 something, lots of experience teaching, experience in different levels of teaching, and realizing that there could be a better way. And from that emerged the California Southern University, which evolved out of necessity, not out of a plan. I knew I wanted to do it better, but I didn't know how to do it better. But when you start off with no students and an idea, and the first student calls you from some place out of town and on a telephone, in those days it was only telephones and a snail mail, and,
Hmm.
and wants to get a master's in business, and then you start talking with them, you realize that there's you 20 years removed, and yes, I can help you get that degree. We'll do it one step at a time. I will work you through each course. You will, and I will correspond by phone, by mail. And in effect, this was a correspondence school. And 42 years later, we're still doing it, but now we're doing it online. And any place in the world, instant communication, emails, Facebook, social networking. My God, it's a totally different world. But the essential thing that I carried forward is we deal with individuals, one faculty, one student. Unheard of. You can't do it, they told me. Well, when you say that to some people like myself say, well, hell, I can do it. It's just it hasn't been done. So anyway, over the 40 years, we've evolved on how to do it properly. So that brings me up to the present, and here I am talking with you and trying to answer any questions you have and inform people that learning. Go, you ask the questions, I'll do the answering.
Yeah, sounds good. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I guess, like, it's sort of, in your current work, has been, yeah, like founding and running California Southern University for, yeah, over 40 years and everything. So, like you said, you did not, kind of think like, oh, when I grow up or get older, I'm going to, found a college or anything like that. What has been maybe like enjoyable about that you didn't expect, or just like any sort of things that you can think of this experience that you've had of certainly, evolving this institution over time, or just like, kind of building something from the ground up and, seeing it grow over time, like any of those things, I guess, just like what resonates with you kind of looking back of like what you kind of enjoyed most about this many decades long journey of founding your own institution.
I really suffered through my graduate school, 15 years. It took me 7 years to get my master's degree. I'll name the school, Columbia University. Great school, great reputation. Yet I was not a full-time student there. I was an irregular student because I came part-time when I could fit it into my living schedule. And I was not able to take all the courses when they offered them. I had to skip around and etc. So they regarded me as being a special student, non-matriculated. I really didn't matriculate until I finished all the coursework and applied for my degree. And they said, "Oh, gee, you have to matriculate. Bingo, you're now matriculated. Here's your degree. Let's go on to the next one." So that stuck with me, and I said, "This is." And then when I was a dean, I said, this should not be a chore. Learning and education is what we do from the moment we're born. We're learning. The brain is just sopping up all kinds of knowledge and experiences and sensations. Why must it be so dull and boring that you don't want to come to class and you want to fall asleep? And then, so uh, that's been my motivator. My motivator is education is fun. It really is. You learn something new, and you never know when it's going to come in handy when you apply it, when your career is going to change, when your outlook on life is going to change, or when there's going to be a virus to slam everything
Mm.
stops. And now you're in a profession, you're in a restaurant business, and all of a sudden you don't have a business. What do you do? You have to have skills, you have to have interpersonal knowledge, you have to have abilities that you've acquired. To me, that's the fun part of education. It prepares you, anyone, for uncertainties, for good times, bad times, calamities, black swan events. Nobody predicted it, this virus, and nobody knows where we're going with it. So, what's the best defense uh, other than staying healthy? I think the best defense is to be prepared for what are you going to do and be when all this nonsense stops and when it stops killing people and we can go out and start mingling again and building ourselves new reputations, new careers, because some careers are going to be shot. They're gone.
Mm.
So that's the fun part of this, that I'm helping people actualize and be whatever they want to be. And they don't may not even know right now what they are or want to be. But that's what education is about. It tries to give you a preparation for your life, and I think that's ongoing, continuous, every day, every minute of every day.
Yeah. And that's kind of, what I wanted to talk with you about, because we kind of were figuring out what might be the best kind of use of our time and what to focus on. And I think just like, because yeah, it's, I'm trying to take as many different angles to this current moment as I can. I've had several recent podcast interviews that we've sort of tweaked to be mindful of our current pandemic, this current moment. So, you've kind of segued really nicely to just this concept of lifelong learning, which I think as sort of this hot button, sort of buzzword, is that thoughtful process as people continue to pursue like continuing education and, whatever form that might take. There's a lot of options out there now, which is really awesome. But I guess just, you're going to mention that of like, the outcomes that come from somebody pursuing kind of lifelong learning in a thoughtful way of being more, resilient in your career. And, that's, I think, just one of the many outcomes. But yeah, just like kind of take this question as you will, but like to you, what makes lifelong learning so important?
I think of it as two different types of learning. There's self-learning that is continuous. It's ongoing spectrum. If you look over the last 40 years, I see those 40 years compressed for me, but there's been momentous changes in education. When I started off, it was pencil and paper, the dial-up phone. If I say dial-up rotary phone, the kids today, people today look at me like I'm a dinosaur. What's a rotary phone? So we've gone from there to instant communication. You could be in China for all I know, yet we're able to communicate. We're able to send messages and draw plans together and design something without having physically meeting with each other. This is a tremendous process of change. Self learning helps us keep up with the change. We learn how to do, like, I'm just learning how to use this microphone. So, learning is a continuous process. The
Mhm.
important thing about education is it's formal learning. It's in a setting where the educators try to distill down the essence of what you're trying to learn and to make it a shortcut. For instance, if you want to know something about marketing, I know something about marketing. I can help you with that because I can distill down 30 or 40 years of experience that you don't have to live through. And that's where formal learning is important. It's more focused. It's a shortcut. It's relevant. It's prepackaged. It doesn't waste your time. And it's current. The information should be current and be applicable, if not this moment, but next moment. So lifelong learning in the self-learning aspect of things, yeah, I want to learn how to do painting, how to do photography, how to play musical instrument. That's all nice. The formal learning is moves you in a discrete path, and I see more of it going on. As a matter of fact, our primary student body is 35 to 55, and we have only about 10 or 15% of our students, our learners, are undergraduate, 18 to 25. Only about 15%. The other 3,000, 4,000 students are all graduates. They're people with careers who feel they need a master's degree to propel themselves further, or they need a new degree to change course, or they're doing something they've always wanted to do. We've had people in their 70s and 80s who've retired and come back and said, I've always wanted a law degree. So, okay, let's do it, man. We go to work, we get the law degree. And so that's what lifelong learning is about. And I think the greatest component of learning over the next decades through online is going to be the lifelong learning for the adult, for the person 35 and older. And it's remarkable. There's only about 30% of the population has bachelor's degrees. I'm interested in those 70% that do not have a bachelor's degrees and the 80% who do not have a graduate degree. My God, we got millions of people to educate. It's
It can be just transformational for somebody's life, just on like the, that self-learning aspect of, learning a new skill or hobby and just sort of getting that fulfillment. And that's something that humans can and should do anytime and all the time. But then yeah, those like kind of formalized degree programs or certificates and those sort of things, like you said, it's kind of you get that credential. It's like, okay, if you take these courses, you're distilling this knowledge down into kind of these chunks, and you're getting to a point where, yeah, if you want to be working in a marketing position, then you kind of have the credential to do that. And yes, people who are furthering a career in their current company or current industry, or trying to switch careers, or maybe if you're took time off to be a full-time parent or something and you're trying to break back in, then getting a credential to kind of distinguish yourself that way. But yeah, it is always just amazing. And I think it can help people kind of recognize like the importance of like the milestone of like when you get a credential like a bachelor's or a master's, like you are now part of a very select few group of people in this country. And certainly for people who work in higher ed, where it's like there are still so many people that could greatly benefit from any sort of credential. And there's a lot of people out there obviously trying to kind of reconcile that through like education as a benefit or different like funding kind of things and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean the value of it is like no matter where you are, like how old you are, what you're doing or what you want to do, the idea of lifelong learning and the kind of the formalized kind of side of the house, like there are opportunities out there for people to really work towards really positive career outcomes, which obviously like impacts the rest of your life too. If you're not, worried about money as much, or you're able to build really good foundation for your life and your family and those sort of things. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot, there of just what makes this so important for sure.
The important thing of one of the important aspects of lifelong learning is it prepares you for an uncertain, unknown future. As a matter of fact, the mission statement for the university is we prepare people for a world that they've yet to visualize or yet to realize. How the heck do you do that? You can't do it by specifics. You have to do it by building generalities in somebody's mind, or in open up to possibilities, and having at least the resources how to think coherently, how to think objectively, how to think uh, in terms of holistic. In order to get the brain thinking in those ways, you have to practice and exercise. Practice, they've determined now that the brain is malleable, that it continues to change and grow. My goodness, it grows. Therefore, it can absorb new knowledge, and new parts of the brain can go to work doing what you want to learn. Right side, left side, total. It's just marvelous, but it needs to be
Mm-hmm.
exercised. So they say that education helps with dementia, so that by practicing and using the brain, it keeps it younger. So that
Right.
alone should be reason to go for lifelong learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess like too, I mean, obviously you kind of have this very longitudinal view as how, you know, kind of segueing here of just like how this whole kind of concept or the delivery of any sort of kind of lifelong continuing education has evolved and changed over time. So you've kind of mentioned that offhand too, of just like going from kind of these what people would call correspondent courses, through regular mail and those sort of things, to now kind of what we're experiencing now is sort of this blossoming of digital education. So I guess just speaking to that, of just sort of your point of view on how that evolution has happened, and what that's meant in terms of being able to deliver high quality education to more people.
The notion that you needed a classroom goes back to 1,000 years, to the University of Bologna, which was founded around 1000 AD. So here we are at 2000 and something, and we're still doing it by classrooms with the talking professor and the students sitting rapidly taking notes and worrying about exams, etc., etc. That's all well and good, you know. My perspective is that the undergraduate school, the bachelor's associates, these really are quote camp college. the
Mm-hmm.
I have 18-year-old grandsons, twins, and they're off in college. They're not learning anything. They're learning how to have parties. They're learning how to be social. They're learning how to be away from their parents. This is an adult, pre-adult transition for them. They don't have the foggiest idea what they're good at or what they would like to be. So for them, it's camp college. But however, as soon as they go out into the real world, then all of a sudden they'll understand the meaning of work and the meaning of a dollar and the meaning of doing something that you like or trying to do it. Then they will start to become self educated. And for them now is the lifelong learning. And that's the help that the internet gives, that the technology gives. We can reach anybody, anytime, any place. And that means that the world can certainly become more educated. And another thing, once you start attending class with somebody or attending a course, even if they're there in China and the other one is in Pakistan and you're here in California, You build a camaraderie, you build a shared interest. So there's going to be more understanding, I think, between peoples and less conflict.
Well, because yeah, I think like that's definitely like a change because, like you said, it kind of started where it had to be like individualized just by the kind of limitations of the time, but now that you can still deliver education to anybody all over the world, but it can be happening as part of a learning community when you know a professor might be having a live session for their online class. You're bringing together a group of people. You might be doing something like an office hours or anything like that, and there's any of the other kind of engagement opportunities that can be integrated into any sort of digital education. But yeah, I mean, because I get kind of like the point, because it's always, I think, like a fair criticism, because I think we're certainly at kind of the peak, especially with the disruptions of the pandemic, of someone choosing to go to college purely maybe just for those kind of set dressings and kind of all the other stuff, other than just literally the focus on like, are you actually getting a good education? Are you like learning more about yourself, learning more about these different concepts that you're getting through your coursework? Like, that's been kind of circling in my mind, where that's going to be the biggest differentiator, is like who is really distinguishing themselves through really high quality digital education, or just making sure that because there just may not be the opportunity to have as many programs or any of these sort of other things outside of the class, a student maybe just not having the tolerance for a low quality distance education, those sort of things. So yeah, I'm just very curious to see, because the fall, I think, is just going to be this kind of bulwark of kind of everything's going to hit it, and we're going to see who is able to withstand in terms of the institutions and how they're delivering this education, being able to do it well and retain their students. But yeah, I mean, it's just interesting too, because I'm sure there's maybe been I guess just anecdotally, if you want to speak to this, because I guess it's just kind of a personal curiosity of just like the types of things that you've maybe taught from a distance. Obviously, again, like you're trying to, like you said, kind of build that resiliency for people in terms of their career skills and that sort of stuff. Like, I'm sure there's probably been so much change over the 40 years that you've been educating people. Like, certainly like an MBA or different things like those have kind of stood the test of time, or law degrees. But I guess, like, anecdotally, can you think of anything that's been like really different just between when you started and now, of like the type of stuff that you've educated people on from a distance?
Well, when we started 40 years ago, it was relegated to being pencil and paper. In the 80s, I recall we tried to get accredited. I recognized accrediting bodies that look at schools, determine their credibility and their value, and whether or not they adhere to educational standards. Well, nobody would talk with us. They said, "Oh, you're online, you're junk. You can't
Mm.
learn online. You must have the traditional model that I mentioned before. Professor in the front of the classroom, 20, 30, 50 students there taking notes and learning. And there's interaction between the students and the faculty and all this dynamic stuff. And that's how learning should be done. Uh, we don't do it that way. We do one faculty, one learner, one course. And that to us is meaningful, because this is the feedback that comes with an individual performing. The faculty reviews the performance, the work, feedback immediately within 24 hours, work the project again, do it better. And from that, there's a feedback mechanism here. It's like when you drive a car, you turn it, it moves. You turn the wheel a little, it moves back. You have a constant feedback trying to keep you on the road between the two white lines. And the same thing with education as we see it. It's got to be a personal uh, process between an instructor and a learner. And we do it. And they said it couldn't be done. Well, we've been doing it now for more than 30 years, and thousands of graduates say, hey, yes, it is. It is. It's a different process. So when you say what changes have happened, this is to us a monumental change. If you take the classroom, videotape it, send it out on the internet, and call that online learning, it's not. It's not. It's simply canned program, canned programming, and it's not. It's just I can just as learn as much from watching Cosmos or a science fiction movie or something.
Mhm.
So that's the biggest change here. Will we see online mature? Yes. Up until recently, we were just cast off cousins. Yes, we became accredited because the quality of our work and our students and the coursework deserves recognition. However, will it be accepted by the other schools now facing the problem of how to educate, how to test what the student's doing, how to control the students? How do you manage seat time, which is a way they take attendance in colleges? Well, you can't take attendance to somebody who's online. You have to have they'll check in and you record. They started at 1 and they ended at 2. They may be sleeping. There's no way to tell.
Right.
So that can't be a measure anymore. So they have to come up with new measures. It's going to be an interesting decade ahead of us that the virus caused, and it's going to change the way we perceive education and the way we deliver education. I think it's going to turn out pretty well, but then I've always been an optimist.
Yeah, well, I share that optimism, and yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, it's there's still a lot yet to come and to see. Where, yeah, I mean, like digital education, like digital strategy is now going to have to be at the forefront, like at the core of any institutions. As they're looking at the horizon, like they need to be really investing a lot of time and energy. Again, in my head, like to be doing it well, because certainly, yeah, there's a lot of that stigma has kind of washed away, but like some places are still doing pretty static, pretty limited versions of online courseworks and degree programs. But there's now a lot more models of kind of what high quality looks like. But then it's kind of like, okay, now what? Like, what's going to be that next kind of change and sort of way that digital education gets to be even better? So I'm sure we'll see now, kind of, yeah, out of necessity, more of that innovation come. So. Um, and I guess, we've talked about a lot in terms of just like lifelong learning, why it's important, some of these changes you've seen over time, because again, a lot of this is for folks happening nowadays, through various digital means. But, and again, there's kind of different levels of commitment or cost and those sort of things in terms of, how anybody might pursue lifelong learning in their routine and their life and make it all work and, fit together. So what would be your advice for somebody who's saying, okay, I hear what you're saying. I got to put more, time and energy into this to, grow myself, grow my career, those sort of things. What advice would you give to someone who's, trying to fit it into their life and all their commitments and that sort of thing?
Fit it in, whether it takes 10 minutes a day or 50 minutes a day. It's as important as taking 20 minutes of exercise a week, or it's as important as having a meal and not being rushed. This is food for your brain. This keeps the brain active just as the exercise keeps the body active and keeps parts moving and functioning. Like if you let your car sit in the garage and don't do anything, it'll deteriorate just by sitting around and doing nothing. So I like to tell people, use your brain, use it. What do you like doing? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? There is now in the world, there is education in every conceivable subject that you want an education in. You want to learn Mandarin from real people in China? You can do it. You can do it online. Do you want to learn how to play pinochle, how to win at poker? All this is learning. You could learn the odds and learn statistics while you're learning how to play poker. It's all a statistics game.
Mm-hmm.
So you can watch the racetrack, you can watch a ball game, you can do all sorts of things like that, and do it in the way that you're doing learning, and that for me is the formal structure of learning, where it introduces a concept that applies, but you never thought about it. And then you have that aha moment. My goodness, look at that. So that's what it's all about. I hope that answers some questions, but I think the future is in that direction. I don't know what it's going to look like because nobody has that knowledge, but we certainly can be ready for it by training ourselves to be able to think better, think more logically.
Well, yeah, like I said, I mean, like, because that's just like the general stuff that's useful, of like the critical thinking, just being kind of comfortable with ambiguity, like those things that those, certainly help build kind of resiliency and kind of being flexible and adaptable and all that. But yeah, a lot of what you said, I mean, just like trying to pursue like what is it that excites you, that you'd have really like that motivation to keep with it. And again, it could be, very slow going, like you kind of went on that long journey for your graduate education, but certainly could just be, if you're going for a graduate degree, you do one course at a time, or if you're, maybe just wanting to do some short courses that are only like a month long in their entirety anyway, and they're completely self-paced, so you could like really just kind of blow through it really quickly when you have the time. But yeah, I mean, there's like so many like cool things out there. I mean, like, because it just made me think when you're saying like, yeah, you could like learn this from this person and do that, like you could it made me think, because I must have clicked on something once, and now I always see the ads on social medias for masterclass where you're like learning acting from a celebrity, and you're like learning, filmmaking from like Martin Scorsese or whatever, like that's, it's kind of like a novelty thing. But obviously, like if that's striking you and getting you really excited, then, I'm sure you're probably more likely to keep with it than you're like, oh, I'm supposed to learn this thing, so I guess I should kind of drag my feet and get it done. There's so many different opportunities and platforms and, subjects out there. And then, like you said, yeah, I mean, it's exercise for your brain. Like it's so important to do, but it doesn't really matter what way you do it and what you're learning about. But yeah, it's just, it keeps your brain active, keeps you engaged, and it's, will help you if you're just kind of getting your brain more active. It's like ideally it would be just sort of keeping you energized and passionate and all aspects of your life, versus kind of feeling stagnant, and that's going to kind of drag you down. It's sort of like a rising tide lifting all ships in terms of just like how you're able to show up. It's just sort of my feeling. Because I know for me, like I took some short courses on esports, because like I've always just been into video games. It's really cool to see how like competitive video games have just been like really this like blossoming industry. So that was just like fun. I had a huge interest in it, so I kept with it and got all the work done. And yeah, I've taken 2 courses out of this like certificate program, and I'll take another one eventually. But yeah, it was just like really cool to do.
That is fabulous because that didn't exist 5 years ago.
Right, exactly.
You couldn't have predicted it, yet here you are in the middle of it, enjoying it and learning. My God, that is wonderful. There should be a course
Yeah.
with you, 3 credits.
Yeah, because I think that was part of it too, where it's like, I was just observing, yeah, this like sort of huge kind of expansion of the esports industry, and I'm like, okay, I got to figure out like what's going on here, because yeah, like in a short couple of years, it's just like, yep, it's pretty mainstream. Like ESPN is broadcasting like competitive video games, so I'm like, okay, well, I want to see what this is all about. So, if that gives anybody else a little bit of a, motivation to pursue whatever kind of lifelong learning resonates with them, then that'd be a good thing. Well, I guess then just sort of on this topic, like, I mean, I ask this to everybody, but I'm especially curious for the conversation that we've been having. Anything lately that you have been reading or watching or listening to? Certainly as we've all been in quarantine and stuff, I know folks have been kind of indulging a little bit more. But anything that you'd want to recommend, we can link out to it in the show notes of like any good books, podcasts, or documentary, like anything that you feel like has been relevant. It could be related to education or just stuff that's been grabbing your attention, but whatever you'd like to give a shout out to, we would love to be able to link out to it in the show notes.
Well, the joke about the cook who on vacation goes to Europe to learn how to do more cooking. I read everything I can on education. I try to keep up with the 4,500 colleges and universities in the United States. I try to keep up with what's going on around the world with education. If anybody comes up with something new for managing students or for managing data or for the changes, how to implement it, then I'm on it. So I'm so wrapped up and focused on what I do that I keep busy at that. It's unfortunately I'm a nerd, but that's where it is.
Well, it's a perfect fit for this podcast. Yeah, just kind of geeking out, nerding out about higher education. Because yeah, I mean, there's definitely like, I mean, like I'll just get emails every day from like Inside Higher Ed and Chronicle, and like there's some other little upstarts that are trying to cover higher ed, with like weekly newsletters and that sort of thing. And yeah, there's other like more global perspectives on higher education, I think from like the Guardian and that sort of thing. But I guess, yeah, I mean, have you read like any particular books lately that you would like recommend, like education related? Because I feel like it's one of the, there's so many people publishing stuff about like, yeah, like the future of education and like, all these different things. I don't know if there's one that you in particular, maybe have read recently that you feel like is a good, relevant read.
No, I can't say there is any one thing. I get about a half a dozen different journals. Uh, Columbia University, NYU, my alma mater, send me their quarterly journals of what they're doing in research and how they're progressing.
Mm.
It's overwhelming just to keep my nose above water in what's happening and the changes. Uh, but I enjoy it, so it's not a labor; it's a labor of love. It really is to try to figure out what's going on and how to do it better. Uh, and may I ask you a question? How did you put together Higher Ed Geek?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it started just as a blog to, like when I was in grad school, kind of like put myself out there and kind of distinguish myself. And then, like this as a podcast kind of came in the shadow of doing a show for another blog. I was like pretty prominent in the higher ed world, a student affairs collective, which again, more focused on like folks who, are doing the work directly with students in a variety of capacities. But so I did that podcast for over 2 years, took a break, and then wanted to kind of keep pursuing this and just do my own show. But I mean, it just kind of, I have kind of a geeky personality, and I got kind of this advice of just sort of like mashing up the things that you're into, and that kind of creates something that is a little bit more unique. So Higher Ed Geek just kind of came to me as sort of the branding, the name. But yeah, it's been going since like 2013. Because yeah, I think that the summer before my final year of grad school, because I graduated in 2014. So yeah, 2013 is when that all kind of came to be. So yeah, it's just been like a nice little hobby and kind of side project for all that time through all the different changes that I've had and moving around and all that. So yeah.
You've become sort of an expert on this, haven't you?
Well, my humility, I don't know if I'm an expert, but yeah, I do like to try to just, I mean, through all these conversations and learning so much, and, similarly kind of trying to keep, keep a pulse on everything that's happening in higher ed as best I can. But yeah, I try to just keep as knowledgeable as I can, just to kind of keep an eye on the trends and stuff. So yeah, I do my best.
Fabulous. I always am interested in how people wind up doing what they're doing, and it's always a fascinating story that it interests them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like that. I gave the very Cliff Notes version of it, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely just been something that I can always kind of take some comfort as being like the constant through different jobs and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, just kind of tries to mash up. Like I wrote a lot on my blog originally about like sort of, take something geeky like Spider-Man or Green Lantern, and like how can you learn a leadership lesson from Green Lantern, or like about work-life balance and Spider-Man because he's trying to balance his like regular identity with being a superhero and that sort of thing. So like I did like a bunch of stuff on that originally, and then definitely the podcast has taken most of my focus with Higher Ed Geek at large. But yeah, it's definitely fun, and yeah, definitely learn a lot just through talking with people. And so just on that note, I mean, just thank you so much for hanging out for the podcast and sharing all that you did. And we'll have ways to connect with you and California Southern and stuff that we mentioned here in the show notes. But yeah, just thanks again so much for your time.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing some more of your pods and picking up some additional information.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.